Welcome to Off the Shelf, short conversations about books with big ideas.
So, the book we're going to talk about this week in Off the Shelf is The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey. So, this is one I'm sure probably loads of you will have read, and it's one that we could talk about for hours. And we're trying to keep these episodes a little bit shorter. So, we might just chat about maybe some of the key pieces that resonated with us, because really there is so much in this. And I must say, I must admit, I suppose, before I read it, I wasn't as sure I'd enjoy it as much as I did. I think anything that has the numbers of, the 7 habits or the 7, it makes me feel a little bit like it might be, simplified, and I mightn't take to it as much. But this definitely isn't. I mean, there's loads of really like key insights that you can take away from this that are actually things that would change, I suppose, how we approach, our work and our lives and our relationships. And I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I must say, as we're starting into this, I had to say to myself, rein it in, because I could
Yeah.
spend quite a bit of time talking about this. And I find when I'm giving talks or I'm giving keynotes or invited lectures, Stephen Covey is inevitably coming up, and trying to encourage people to think. I mean, he's a guru in the field of leadership development anyway, and this we know, but I had a really strange experience in this book in that it sat on my shelf for about 20 years, which I'm ashamed to say, and I hadn't gotten to read it. And I don't know what it was. Maybe it was the cover or something. I don't know what it was that really didn't draw me to it. But then a couple of years ago, I moved back into reading it, and there's something about reading a book at the right time, and this was one of them. I
Mm,
think the bit of experience that I had maybe under my belt at that point, as well as the way that I had begun to think differently about leadership, this really, I expected it to be more of a guide to effective leadership or a guide to almost like managing people, but it's not about that at all. It's about how we're understanding ourselves in relation to the work that we do. So I found it really, really powerful.
what about it do you think resonated with you at that particular time? What made it the right time?
I'm not sure. Maybe I was thinking a bit more deeply about how, well, maybe I think there's a movement in the to go back into the academic piece for a minute, there's a movement in the literature to separate leadership from the person. So we don't talk about styles of leadership or leadership behaviors anymore. We're talking much more about models of different ways of talking about leadership. But my gut is telling me that you cannot separate the interior world, the who I am as a person and what I bring to the work. They're so deeply interconnected because
Mm,
my behavior as a leader is really watched and felt and experienced by others. So I need to be aware of what I'm doing and what's driving what I'm doing because that's what's being experienced by the people around me. So I think maybe my Stephen Covey talks about sharpening the saw. I think my saw got sharpened anyway in relation to my thinking about
yeah.
that. So when I came to this book, it I was ready, I think, for that. So
Yeah.
um and now I genuinely feel it's one of the texts that a leader should invest in and delve into. I think it's important.
Yeah, no, for sure. Like the person of the leader and the practice of the leader going hand in hand. And I think this does really kind of lift up some of those key pieces. Like I think from reading this book though, it is quite challenging in different
Mm.
respects. I think if you're open for it to be challenging, I suppose you could if you read it with that kind of willingness to really take on board the messages. There are some pieces that can be quite difficult because I suppose one of the key underlying pieces of it, at least in my reading of it, is that kind of if you want things to change, it's starting with yourself, um, rather than looking externally to
Yeah.
what things outside of me can I change. It's about thinking about what I'm doing and how I'm engaging and how I'm interacting, with myself or with others or with projects or with leadership, whatever it is, So, I think, yeah, there's an openness to that, I suppose,
Mm.
as well. And I think that's, I guess, part of why I asked you. I was wondering what was it, that
Yeah.
you felt it was the right time. And I think that was something for me, that I was kind of trying to figure out lots of different pieces myself anyway. And I was in that kind of space of trying to figure out, right, where am I really sitting in relation to, all of these different pieces of my life. And so I suppose that openness then to saying, okay, yeah, there are things that are totally within my control here, that I need to figure out. And that's, even the first, the first habit is that be proactive piece. And it's done in
Mm,
a empowering way. Like, it's not
yeah,
like you need to get up off the couch and go and do something, but you do have control over different elements here, and it's empowering you to see that, I suppose.
yeah. I also found that piece around proactivity has resonated hugely with me, and I find myself referring to it a lot when I'm working and teaching in the leadership space. um, from the way that you've described it, but also from the point that he makes around respecting the proactivity of the other person. So
Mm,
when if you do things for someone else, even though it is their role, and you do it because you want to be helpful, you're actually denying the essential proactivity of that person to grow up into the standard of the work that they should be in. You're taking that away, you're enabling in a negative way as opposed to a positive way. And people will hand that over to you, and you'll become the busiest leader on the planet, if you keep doing that. And I think in my desire to keep everybody happy at the beginning of my leadership journey, I did a lot of that, and I had to unlearn it and discern that there was a better way of doing it. And I think that Stephen Covey really helped me get there.
yeah, that's
Yeah.
really interesting. That's a really interesting insight from it. And I think it also helps with those sticky situations. And I know we've
Yeah.
talked about that whole, circle of concern and circle of influence piece. And,
Yeah.
um, again, I'm sure many people listening may have come across that. If you haven't, it's definitely worth
Oh,
having a look at,
for
because
sure.
it's really helpful way of thinking. And I suppose it's just that sort of, what are the things that are concerning me at the moment? What is it that I actually have influence over? And it's a helpful tool of mapping out, what is it that you do have influence over in a certain situation, but also he talks about it in a way that really reminds you the more that we live in that kind of area of concern that we don't have control over, the smaller that our sense of what we can influence gets. And
Yeah.
vice versa. The more that we work within or live within, I'm saying work, but live within what we can influence, and find ways in which we can kind of navigate that and make a difference and make a change, the larger that our sense of what we can influence gets. And
Yeah.
there's something powerful in that.
Yeah, I certainly use that circle of control and circle of influence when I'm really feeling under pressure about something. I've come back to that, and it's helped me ground myself back into what do I need to focus on. To me, that's one of the most powerful tools that I took out of the book. But the other but it's directly related, is that when he talks about where our energy goes, our intention grows and it flows into that
Mm,
space. And so to be really aware of the power of our thoughts, that our self-talk is creating our energy in the way that we're working. So even that circle of control, that's what we're cutting through, is where our thoughts have gone into spaces where um, we feel out of control around our work. And the big question that I took out of one of the pieces that he wrote was, you control your thinking, but if you're not controlling your thinking, who is? I was like, well,
mm,
that's a really great question.
yeah,
So I guess what I took out of this book is that you have more power, more agency, more choice than you realize.
yeah.
It's just about being intentional, which you always say about being intentional, but it's about being intentional about that and allowing ourselves to take time to grow that in
Yeah,
ourselves. I loved the
absolutely.
book. Yeah.
I think for leaders, there's a big piece in kind of relation to how we manage our time. But it's done in an interesting way. It's not just kind of like the typical time management sort of conversation. He talks about putting first things first. And he talks about, what's urgent and important. And there's like a little quartile of what that looks like for those of you who like the visuals. It is an interesting way to look at
Yeah.
it as well. But what I think the important message behind all of that is we should be thinking about what is really important as well as what is urgent, because
Yeah.
obviously there's so many demands being placed on leaders, and we know that the role is getting more and more complex, and there's so many balls in the air, if we were to use that juggling sort of metaphor. But he really puts the question of, like, is efficiency really what we're looking for here? Like, there's a quote that I had highlighted in my copy here, and it's, but is there a chance that efficiency is not the answer? Is getting more things done in less time going to make a difference, or will it just increase the pace at which I react to the people and circumstances that seem to control my life? So it reminds us that we can get into that sort of rat race of getting things done, without actually taking that kind of, like, he talks about control of my life, but I suppose for me it's really that ownership is what I'm thinking
Yeah.
about, the ownership of what I'm doing and when I'm doing it, and how I'm doing it, to prioritize, yeah, not just what's urgent, but what really is important. So I think for leaders, that's a key piece that I took from it, at least.
Yeah, it's massive. I felt the same when I came across that. And then I thought, and who am I being efficient for? Is it that I feel
Mm,
good when other people think that I'm efficient? Or like what am I doing? So I'm definitely, after reading this, and people have heard me say it, I'm on a bit of a mission around efficiency and beginning to look more at human-centered ways of working. And this is a simple piece. I know people can hear from us, we love this book, but it's something that really struck me was when he writes about the word responsible, and he pulls it apart
mm,
and he says response able. I was like, oh my God, that completely changes the way that we look at responsibility. So is responsibility my problem I have to fix, or is response able, being response able, around where am I able to move into the space and make a difference? And then who else can also move into that space? Does it just have to be me? I loved that. I got an awful lot
yeah.
from that. Yeah.
And he does also talk about, because I suppose the pieces that we've referred to there are quite like intrinsic, and I do think there is a lot of that in the book, the that real personal piece. But he does also think about how we situate ourselves with others as well, and about those relationship pieces. Like, he really talks about empathy and the importance of, before we try to be understood, that we really try to understand
Yeah.
another person. And again, for leadership, I suppose that's huge. There's not a piece around, that being understood that isn't important. And there is all of that person-centered stuff inside in the book, but it's also that piece around the importance of connection, and that conversation is connection, rather than just the sharing of information as well. So I do like that it does kind of, particularly for leadership, because it's not, just one person leading in isolation. So I think it is nice the way that's still a thread that's brought through, even in
Yeah.
a very person-centered message.
Yeah. One of the other things that I really picked up from this was about choosing what I'm going to pick up. That we choose our behavior. And in doing that and making that choice, we're choosing the attendant consequences, is basically what he says. Like when we pick up one end of the stick, basically we're picking up the other as well, just to be clear about that.
Mm,
And that's made me really think more about, do I really need to fix that? Do I really need to go into that space? Does it really matter if I don't answer that particular email? Because if I don't answer it, well, within a day, they'll have found the solution, they'll have enabled themselves to find the solution, and they'll move forward. It might make me look less efficient, but I'm choosing not to pick up um, somebody else's problem or somebody else's piece to fix. That I'm there for the pieces that are very important, that I have the time for, but I don't have to pick up every stick that passes me as the river flows. Um, I got a lot also from that about choice. And I know this will come up in some of the other books that we've been chatting about and reading, but that, and I keep using this phrase about being deliberative or making choice now, because I'm one human being in a role that's probably much bigger than one person can do. That's what a leader is really most of the time. So choice becomes far more important, more strategic then. And I think Stephen Covey's book gives you permission to think like that. You sort of let yourself off the hook a bit about not having to be in control of everything.
yeah. And it's that efficiency for who and for what piece as well, isn't it?
Yeah,
That you were
yeah,
talking about, yeah. I mean, we've scratched the surface there, really,
yeah,
haven't we, of
yeah.
of what's discussed in this book. And it's really interesting that, we were both kind of a little hesitant. I mean, for you, it was more that it was sitting there and that you hadn't started. And when I was looking at it, I was just like, I don't know if this is for me, but we both have come out of it with so much.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, I really think it is a must read.
It's one of the, if you were to envisage a leader's toolkit, this one
Yeah.
needs to be in it. It just needs to be in it. So when you finish it, and it's a bit of a tome, like you're investing, you're going to give this a bit of time when you pick it up. But it's one that I really am so glad. It's a bit like
Yeah.
the four agreements. I just am so glad that I took the time to and invest the time in. It was like CPD to read this book. It really, for me, it's that good.
And do let us know what you think. If you've read it or if you read it after hearing this, let us know what you think of it. Like we'd love to hear that. And also like that, if you have any suggestions of what books we'd look at next, we're always looking for more suggestions to come. So do get in touch and let us know if you have any ideas as well.
And enjoy the read.